Shalom, welcome. This is Avraham Shira for Nar Shalom. We've just finished Purim Sheni, Shushan Purim in Jerusalem. It's been a pretty wild day, as I'm sure you can imagine. About 200,000 people converge on Jerusalem celebrating the festival. And tonight we're going to talk about some connections with Purim and redemption. Rabbi Nachman said an amazing thing 200 years ago. He said that the first redemption was the model of Egypt, the paradigm of Egypt. That there was one nation, and it was built in Egypt, and it was taken out of Egypt and sent into the desert and given into the promised land. He said that was the first and the foremost model of the idea of redemption. And now he said we have Purim. And he doesn't really describe much of what he means. But we have this Chag called Purim. And this great rabbi who had divine inspiration was telling us a very big secret about the future redemption. Well, a lot of us believe that that future redemption is happening now. That the first redemption was 3.5 million people leaving the large empire ruling nation of the times, Egypt, and now we have the Jewish people all over the world coming back to Egypt. So what happened here? God promised Abraham the land of Israel. And when God makes a promise, he always comes through. There's no such thing as a promise coming up empty when it comes from God. We have to have that belief, and we see that it's true because he never lets us down. God will never let you down when you believe in him. And so God promised Abraham the Holy Land, and then all of a sudden, his children are being turned into a nation by 210 years of slavery in Egypt. And so then at a certain point, he sends Moses and he lifts the nation out of Egypt and he brings them to the Holy Land. That's one model of redemption. Why? Because we have a people born from the midst of another people and they are moved into their own land. In Purim, we don't have that at all. We have Achashverosh, we have 127 feudal states, if you will, that he's in charge of, which basically means you pay me and I protect you, which is kind of like what they do in the ghetto, in a lot of places nowadays. They do it in Israel. It's called protection money. But basically it's protection money on a national scale. And that's what Achashverosh had going. And Achashverosh didn't like Jews. And he had a first minister who also didn't like Jews. And so they had this plan to get rid of the Jews. Now, Achashverosh had this idea of wanting to look good to people. And so he didn't want to be the one who showed the world that he hated Jews. He said, I'd rather let Haman show the world that he hates Jews. He can take the blame and I get the benefits. Enough said about anti-Semitism. We're going to do a whole large development and class about anti-Semitism as another time, because it's a subject unto itself to understand what anti-Semitism really is. But our point is that why is Purim the new paradigm of the global redemption? Because you see, the Jews were taken out of one country, put in another, and then along comes Nebuchadnezzar and he exiles all the tribes because displacement policy was the name of the game when you were conquering a nation. And so Nebuchadnezzar came to Israel, he took the people out and he displaced them and sent them all over his kingdom, his empire. And that's how the Jews began to spread in the world. Before then, there was no such thing as Jews in China or Jews in America or anywhere else. Jews were in Israel. Nebuchadnezzar came, he conquered, he took them out, he spread them, and over the course of 2,400 years, they were built up and then traveled, of course, from nation to nation, from empire to empire, as world history developed. But the point is, at a certain point, God said, okay, guys, come on back. We're bringing you home. The new redemption is happening. So the new redemption is bringing the Jews back from exile. The first redemption was bringing us to our land. The second redemption is the tikkun, or the repair, of being sent into exile. Okay, and God has been calling us back for quite a while, and certainly since 1948, the declaration of the Jewish state, the Rambam says that this is the main feature of redemption, is that we have autonomy, sovereignty as a people. Now, some people say, well, they're not religious, and then some people say, well, they're not religious enough, and all this kind of talk. You know, I don't buy that talk. We're talking about global patterns. We're not talking about each individual's observance of the commandments. Two different things. Each person has his own relationship with God, and then the nation has its own relationship with God. Okay, and we try to do the best we can as a nation, of course. But we were given this land in 1948, and now look where we are 72 years later. People are coming back. They're still coming back. And what we see is that in the Purim redemption model, all the Jews did not go back to the rebuilt Beit HaMikdash. Remember, Esther's son Darius II gave the order when he was 9 years old. It's an amazing thing. A 9-year-old kid told the Jews, go back and rebuild your temple. That must have been embarrassing for a 9-year-old kid to tell them to do it. But they did do it. But they weren't forced to go back. They weren't forced to leave Ahasuerus in his kingdom, not in Shushan Abira, which is today's Iran, not in any of the other states. They could go if they had that opportunity, but it wasn't a forced recall. It wasn't a forced return to the Holy Land. And so you see that there was a change in the paradigm. What was it? The first redemption, the Jews were forced out of Egypt by the Egyptians themselves. They gave them their gold and their silver and they said, get out of here. We're tired of you. We're tired of your leader. We're tired of his plagues. Now, the Jewish people have matured. They're no longer children being told what to do. They're given a choice. See, that's the difference between children and adults. Children can't handle free choice too much because their minds and their experience is not developed enough. But adults are supposed to be able to handle free choice. So God doesn't force the Jews back from Purim, from Shushan, from the capital of the then ruling nation in the world, which happened to be anti-Semitic. God gave them the choice. You can go back or you can stay here. Or you can go anywhere you want. So you see, there's something has changed in our relationship with God. We're no longer children. We're no longer need to be told what to do, and God doesn't have to take us by the hand with Moses and split the sea and make the firstborn die and all the other plagues that happened in Egypt. Those were clear signs. And we see that even though they had all these clear signs of God's power and his control of reality, they still were unable to really prevent a lot of tragedies along the way. Now, along the way, there were a lot of plagues against the Jews. We have the plagues that hit after Korach rebelled from Moses. We have the plagues that hit after the tribe of Shimon rebelled against Moses because of the Maseh Zimri and Cosbi, the princess of Moab. Then we have a plague. We have plagues later in Jewish history, of course, with the Assyrian army, and in the times of Elisha, which is later on in the book of Kings, there was a great plague. Those were against the Syrian army. But regardless, we see throughout history, plagues are used as one of the tools of divine providence. Now let's say you just happen to tune into this class and you don't believe in divine providence, or you're not sure about it, or sometimes it's around and sometimes it's not. Those are all legitimate human positions that we all have to go through. Our path is a long one. Now, ultimately, I set out with the idea that if there's one moment of divine providence, why wouldn't all your life be divine providence? It just sometimes it's revealed and sometimes it's hidden. Sometimes you see it and sometimes you don't. Okay, so now we understand more of this Purim model of redemption is this nation that's grown up into a people, and now they have a choice to go back and build God a temple. Now, building God a temple, it's a big deal. Why is it a big deal? Because it becomes the global focal point for the revelation of the divine. And God's reputation depends on that. And he wants us, the human race, not just the Jewish people, he wants the human race to have a focal point so that we quit serving idols. Because if you look at the 10 plagues in Egypt, they all correspond to, and this is another Shira I'll have to give on Patreon or on Web Yeshiva at another date, The 10 plagues correspond to 10 types of idol worship, of false service. Okay, so those 10 plagues were all there to fix the different aspects in our human consciousness that wants to serve the wrong thing. Because it's not just about serving Pharaoh. It's serving the god of the rain and the god of the fertility and the god of the Nile and the god of the jackals and the god of the cows. It's a long list. And each one of those aspects you'll see in the plagues of Egypt. If you go through them, God is knocking out their gods one at a time. Okay, so the model for Purim is replete with examples of the transition from the childlike state that we left Egypt as a new nation into the more adult state as we became an international nation. We became sophisticated. We became multilingual. We went out of our country. We went out of our homes. We went out of our culture. We got new science, new wisdom from all the people that we interacted with that we didn't have before. Now, of course, we gained a lot of that in Babylon as well. But the Babylonian exile really just morphed into the Persian exile. They're all one long exile, basically. Okay, so this thinking will do us a lot of good when we look at today. Because today we are in a different state. We are an old nation. We've been around longer than almost any other people, maybe the longest. And we're tired. We've been traveling 2,000 plus years. We've been hounded every step of the way. We've been lifted to the top and thrown into the pit countless times. And finally, God said, come home. Well, guess who the world enemy today is? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's the Ayatollah. The head of Persia today, the religious leader of Iran today. When these fellows are funding massive terrorist activities, sending balloons over children that have, IEDs in them, tiny little bombs that explode when they hit the ground, etc. These people they're not going to be satisfied with any peace plan. They want to kill. They're after us just as bad as Haman was and just as bad as Hitler was. So there is this global redemption now, but it's a different direction. We're going home as opposed to going out further and out further and out further across the oceans. There's a whole series of books and papers written about how the Moranos, the Jews that were forced to convert in Spain and Portugal, they're the ones who led the world global voyage, that what's called the era of discovery, who founded North and South and Central America. The Moranos were on the ships with Vasco da Gama, with Columbus, with Vespucci, with all of them. And so you see, and Cortez, Coronado, the list keeps going. So you see the Jews have been on the forefront of the spreading of the Western world because they had to, because they were being hounded. It wasn't a pleasure trip. They didn't found Mexico because they had nothing else to do in Spain or Portugal. They're running for their lives. And we're tired. And it's time to come home. And God says, okay, 1948, we're going home. And he gives us the call. And we all now are adults. We are adults. We can think. We can weigh the issues and look at life around us and decide what we want to do. But guess what happens? We still have all these false gods in our head. We believe in God. But a lot of people believe in God and they still bow down to their boss, or they bow down to the stock market, or they bow down to Hollywood, or they bow down to the NBA. There's a lot of bowing going on, right? And, and this has got to be fixed. Now, of course, I'm leading to today's situation. I was asked by many people to talk about this virus that's going around, what I call it the Achash virus, right? The Achash virus. Achash virus in Hebrew, if you take that word and you translingually translate it, it means Achash, I will be quiet, virus. I will be a silent virus. Now, okay, that's clever play of language. Now put it on the side. The idea of the corona, of course, in Spanish means crown. The crown, what is a crown? It's a symbol. that whenever we decide, okay, that guy's going to be king, we're going to put a crown on his head. What does that crown symbolize? That we made him king? Well, it's a little more than that. The idea of the crown is that he's the one that we identify as having this most powerful connection to God. And that's King David, that's King Solomon, that's King Asa, and many of the other great holy Jewish kings. They put that crown on their head as a recognition. He's the one that has the best connection to God. And when we need to know whether we should go to war or not, or whether we should make peace or not, or whether we should invest or not, or build a bridge, you go to the king. You go to the guy who has the best connection to God. And so that's really the true symbol of the crown, because it's a symbol of the aura, the corona. A corona in Hebrew, it's also this idea of the surrounding lights, the lights of your aura. Okay, so now what happens? Of course, that's representational of God, of a relationship with the Creator. That's the true king. So he gets to wear the crown. And of course, we have a true king above all those crowns. We have the King of Kings, the creator of creation, which it's really hard to be atheist, in my opinion, if you just examine the evidence. If you do, study a little post-quantum physics and a little bit of the different things that they're discovering all over the world, it's really hard to be an atheist nowadays. I feel sorry for them, And so, but still we have these other kings over us, these false idols. And so God does what? God says, okay, you're having a hard time making me your king? You're still, serving all these other idols? I guess I'll have to send you another reminder. A different crown. A false crown. And the false crown, of course, is this virus. Because in Kabbalah, you have 10 sefirot, which are the 10 powers of the soul, right? 3 in the head, 7 in the body. They represent a combination soul, which are all the traits of God given to man. And we have access to those powers through our connection to Him. If you want to be wise, connect to God, you're going to be wise. If you want to be kind, connect to God, you're going to be kind, and so on and so forth for all 10 traits. But in Kabbalah, there's also a thing called the 10 dark crowns. The 10 dark crowns are the opposite inverse powers of the good powers in your soul. So that if you're kind, what's the opposite crown of kindness? Cruelty. And what's the opposite crown of understanding? That you take your understanding and you do evil with it. And the opposite crown of loyalty is disloyalty, and so on and so forth, all the way down the tree of life. So the idea of the dark crowns is an old idea in Kabbalah, but it's very important because when we don't place the right crown on top, guess what? The dark one gets automatically replaced. It's waiting there all the time. It's not like there's an election, So the dark crown, of course, is this virus, Corona, COVID-19, and God said, okay, this is one way I'm going to try to wake the world up. And this is my personal belief. Everybody has their interpretation. It makes sense to me because God is not mean and He's not cruel and He's not looking to hurt us. He's looking for us to get real and get straight and get true with Him. And the Jewish people are part of that. And we have our work to do. But at the same time, He's like shaking up the whole earth and saying, Jews, what are you doing? Where are you? Are you going home to be part of the final redemption? Now in Persia, you didn't have to go home. You could be a holy Jew in California, in Washington State, in Hawaii, in China. You could be a holy Jew anywhere. If you have the strength, if you have the power, if you have a community behind you, it makes it a lot easier. So this whole idea of coming home, I'm not giving that as a panacea solution to the problem. A lot of people like to do that and say, oh, if all the Jews only came home, it'd be fine. Well, we have Corona here too in Israel. The 77th, another rabbi got it today, the 77th. Okay, so let's not ramp ourselves up too high over here. We're part of the human race and we have a huge responsibility. And so this virus is a direct communication from a very high place. And that's why I believe it was given this name. You don't want to accept my crown? I'll give you a different crown. Now, the interesting thing about a crown also, it means a submission to authority. So when I bow to the king, I accept him as the authority, that is a form of submission. And of course, we already said that the king is the authority because he bows to the even higher authority. But if we don't want to bow to that authority, God's going to give us another authority. Pirkei Avot says if you accept the yoke of Torah, the responsibility of keeping mitzvot, then you get the yoke of the king. And if you don't accept it, you get the yoke of hard work and labor like Adam did when he was first kicked out of the garden. So that paradigm also is still happening to every individual today, each in our own personal relationships. Now some people blame God, so am I blaming God? No, God forbid. Listen to how it works. See, God is protecting us all the time from evil. It's the removal of his protection because of our deeds that makes the opening for the virus. When we're surrounded by holiness, we're protected from evil. When we do good deeds, evil can't get near you. When you speak good, and you think good, and you do good, the evil can't get close. But if I start to do the wrong things and say the wrong things and think the wrong things, I'm starting to, literally my force fields are getting thinner and thinner. The shields, Star Trek shields, they're going down. And if they go down far enough, then there can be a breakthrough point of the other side, of the evil. So it's not God's fault. It's human behavior that depletes our own protection from him. All right, and so, okay, that doesn't make you probably feel much better either, I'm sure. It doesn't make me feel much better. These Kabbalistic truths are not here to pat us on the back. They're here to educate us so that we do the right things. Now, of course, this disease, this virus, an interesting thing, if you look up what a virus is, it's an organism that's smaller than a cell, and it attaches to a cell of an organism, of its carrier, its host, and it doesn't eat the cell. It goes inside the cell and takes its DNA and starts to replicate itself off the DNA until the cell explodes. There's nothing left of the soul. It loses its DNA. It loses its divine code of self. Is eaten up by the virus. What does a virus do? It eats up the person's mental power of who he is. That's what it's doing on this microscopic level. And that's what evil does. Evil takes your brain and feeds off of it. So that I don't think the right thoughts, I'm thinking about the wrong things. And if that happens long enough, consistently enough, then a person can become, chas v'sham, completely evil. So you see, evil is this global name we've given to the other side, to the powers of darkness. Now we introduce tonight the idea of the 10 dark crowns. Okay, but nonetheless, it works just like these viruses. It goes in and attacks the mental, genetic material of a person. It takes away his true self. It takes away your free choice to choose to do good things even. And that's what evil does. And anybody who has done something wrong knows, The rabbis say, Ohev mea rotzeh matayim, that a person who loves money, he's never going to be satisfied with money. And he'll steal for money. And once he steals for money, he's going to steal more. Because he's let that virus into his brain to steal. And it goes that way with every single sin. And if we want to admit it or not, we can call it addiction, if you want to call it in the language of psychology. If you you can call it criminality, if you want to label it in what they call it downtown. It doesn't matter the label, folks. What matters is the reality that we live. And everybody knows when we do something wrong, we get the urge to do it again and again until we say enough and you throw off the plague. So unfortunately, every night we turn on the news and every night we see new things. And the Jewish solution has always been the same, just like it was in the Purim redemption. Prayer, fasting, learning, enhancing the mind, putting new software in my mind. Prayer, enhancing my connection to God. Talking to somebody makes you a better friend to that person. talking to God makes you a closer person to the Creator. And the third one, fasting, that's pretty tough. Because fasting is a form of self-sacrifice, where you're giving up your body. You're giving up your oil, the oils in your body, your blood, your food, everything depends on this system. So a lot of people can't fast nowadays. So the rabbis say, don't fast, just give charity. Now, we're not talking about, I'm going to give this $100 and there's not going to be any more coronavirus in Israel. I don't think it's that simple. But what I do know is when you give, even 5 shekels, you give $2 to somebody that you don't even want to give to. Say it's a homeless person outside the airport and you know they're going to go buy, another tinfoil envelope. That's not the point. Of course we want to give our money to the righteous people, but you create a force field of goodness around you by the giving, even the tiniest amount. And that's what it's about here. It's not fearing a virus. It's fearing how much connection I have with God, how much force field of goodness I have around me to protect me and my family. And sometimes even if you pray and learn all day, it's not going to be enough, depending on what your role is in society, what your role is in a community. Some of the most righteous people I have known, were murdered. Weren't they good? Didn't they deserve protection? Of course they did. But by God takes out the good, because that's a different weighing, a different set of scales when it comes to the whole generation. Remember, you have your own individual relationship, your family, your community, the nation, the entire world. And sometimes God does take out the good people in order to help the people who are still on the road. Because there are certain people who have perfected themselves. They don't need to be here anymore. When you're perfect, you go to heaven. What do you need to be here for? You fixed everything. So these are calculations that obviously you need a huge mind to even contemplate. And let's let God do his calculations, and we have to do ours. And ours is to increase in goodness, to build the force field of goodness around us, to protect us. Doesn't mean I walk into the hospital without a mask on. Hey, everybody, how's it going? Got any corona patients today? No. We be careful. We could be respectful. You wash your hands. You do what they tell you to do. But you don't walk around with fear, with paranoia, with panic in your heart. If I want to be panicking, I want to be panicking about the fact that I didn't daven, that I get to minyan on time, that I did a good deed, that I didn't insult somebody when I didn't mean to. That's the thing I should worry about. I can't control these bacteria in the air. All I can do is control my relationship to the Creator, wherever he is and wherever he's found. So this is a very complex issue. As Mr. Shore here is telling us, complex. It's a diverse audience out there. I know that it's a big world. But you know what? I have faith that every single human being has a spark of God in him, and he understands truth. Even if I don't know truth, even if I'm far from truth, it's there. If I'm willing, I set my tuning fork to truth, I'm going to know it. And I can feel it. And I can feel, when you feel truth and you're truthful, then you'll know falsehood when it comes up. Okay? And you'll know fake news, and you'll know hysteria, and you'll know all the things that are out there. There has been a plague every year for the last 10 years of global proportions. I started to make a list. I ran out of time here, but AIDS, bird flu, Ebola, SARS, all of these different plagues have been coming around year after year. What's new? So folks, we got to strengthen our relationship with the Creator. However you perceive him, whatever name you give him, whatever religion you choose, it doesn't matter. What matters now is that you get in that dialogue. You open up your heart and your mouth and you talk to him, and you ask for the sake of your children and your grandchildren, to be protected, to not make the wrong moves. Because when there's a judgment on a place, if you're in that place at the wrong time, you can get hit even if you're a perfect tzaddik. And that's what decrees are. And if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you go down, even if you're the most righteous person. But what we pray for is to be in the right places and not be in the wrong places. So this is a very complex thing, as we said. We know that in the Bible, the way that Moses was commanded to deal with the plagues was to send out incense. Incense, a pleasant smell, a powerful scent. Why? Well, we understand that incense is actually, of course, various herbs that burn and they waft into the air. And I bet they'll take out a few corona germs as well. But the incense was used over and over in the temple service, and it was also used to remove evil energy however it arrived, especially in the form of illnesses and sicknesses. Now, if you're sitting in the middle of Europe in the Dark Ages and there's the bubonic plagues raging, incense might not do it for Europe, you know. We have to be smart. We can't just burn a little stick of incense and expect everything's going to be perfect. But this is one of the ways that we evacuate negative energy. Now, this is ancient Kabbalah. You can accept it or not accept it. That's fine. Whatever works for you. If you have an open heart and mind, you can check it out yourself. Investigate. Do the work. Open the books. That's what I did. I didn't take all the religious teachings on face value. I checked them out. And I read and I learned and I read and I learned until I said, whoa, there's too much here. Everybody can't be lying to me. After 4,000 years of Judaism, they all can't be lying. So you know what? I want to bless everyone with protection, with intelligence, with smartness, to strengthen your connection to Hashem and to conduct yourselves intelligently with this virus. It's going to go away. It's going to be contained. And people are going to be hurt. They're being hurt. They've been hurt. And it's really sad. And we got to pray for them too. But what we have to do is understand that there is a global redemption happening. And the first redemption in Egypt took a year's time. And those 10 plagues worked themselves out into reality over a year's time. Okay? So if it's globalized, it's not a little country called Egypt anymore, it's the entire world, we can expect that it's not going to be a year-long process. It's going to take a lot longer. And it's been going on. And it's continuing. I even heard they had a plague of frogs in Athens. I used to think they had a plague of fleas, at summer camp. But really, folks, we've got to maintain our sanity over here, and we got to be smart. And always, when I don't know where I'm at, I open the book. I open the Sefer. I open the Torah. One word from God, and I'm back on the center. And I want to bless you all with that intimate connection with your Creator, because He loves you and He wants your survival. He wants your success. He wants humanity to get over this and through this. And it depends on us to fix what we need to fix individually, and then nationally, and then internationally. And it's going to happen. I wrote up a whole page of notes about the Chinese regime and communism, but I don't think that's going to work here. I don't think we need to go there. We know what the Chinese have done to their people. We know what virus is. We know that they have factories that produce viruses. So do other nations. And why they've been chosen to be the source of this virus, that's really not our calculation. Because there's a lot of good Chinese people, a lot of them, and they need help too. They're suffering tremendously. So God willing, we're all going to be together again for happier subjects and happier times. We just finished Purim. We're going back into reality, and we have what to do. We have work to do. So God bless all of you. We'll look for you again on Facebook. Look for AvrahamShira.com, Patreon, YouTube, whatever works. We'll be there together. All the best.